Marketing is icky, it's deceptive, it's overwhelming. Either I don't put food on my table, or I do, but I sell my soul. So someone who's gone through this process and is right here versus trying to skip to right here, this person is so much more educated on what you do and their problem and the potential solutions. They can now fully value your offer. And so then I discovered, oh man, I can just erase a headline on my website and write a new one, and sales increase.
Hey everyone, I am here today to share with you a new book called Simple Marketing for Smart People, which I co-authored together with Billy Broas, a friend, a marketing expert who was really pivotal, transformational in the journey of building a second brain. So welcome, Billy.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
What was the first moment that you can remember us speaking?
It was at the Teachable Summit, and they were featuring online course creators. And I said, oh, Tiago, I took Tiago's course a few years ago. When I was going through your course, I thought, man, this material is so good, but I see the way that you're marketing it, and it's working for super productivity nerds like me. But the average person is just not going to see the full value that you're providing here. We need to describe this thing differently.
So we did that. I joined your program, you coached me, helped me through different things, and we basically created what I would say is the first real marketing, a series of emails for building a second brain. And the next year, when the pandemic hit, it just exploded. So if you had to summarize who this book is for and what you're trying to do for them, how would you do that?
The book is really for the person who needs to do marketing to sell their products and services, but they're not a professional marketer. There are a lot of smart people out there these days. And by smart people, I mean they have a subject matter expertise. There's a topic that they know a lot about, and because of that, they get great results for their customers and clients, but they struggle to market that thing. And they realize, oh my gosh, I need to market this thing to reach new people, but I'm not a professional marketer. Marketing is icky, it's deceptive, it's overwhelming. I wanted to write a book for that person, the person who has a great product or service, but struggles to market it.
Which describes me perfectly back in 2019.
Exactly, yeah. And me when I first started going into business for myself, leaving the 9-to-5 world. And I loved that job, but eventually I just had to do my own thing. I wanted to be free. And so I went into a topic that I knew a lot about and was really passionate about, which was brewing beer at home. So as I worked that day job on nights and weekends, I built this blog, and then I started launching online courses. And despite having this background, I had an MBA, so I had this fancy business degree, and I thought, oh yeah, I can totally sell online beer brewing courses. Not the case. It turned out to be one of the hardest things I ever did. It was a very humbling experience. And then I dove right in and said, okay, let me figure this thing out. Let me learn this thing, right? That's the answer, is more education. That's always been my answer. I eventually realized that marketing is not what I thought it was. It wasn't all this deception and gimmicks and hype and everything. At the end of the day, it really is educating your reader so they can fully value what you do. And that takes really good messaging. And that's why this book is largely about messaging.
So this book is kind of encapsulating not just your work, but your own life story and your own experience into almost what you wish, I'm guessing, what you wish you could have read back then.
Oh, absolutely. I tried so many things. You know, all the typical things that we try, all the WordPress plugins and doing social media and all that. And then, you know, it was when I discovered copywriting. Again, speaking of words, right? Discovering copywriting, which at first I thought was a legal term, right? I thought it was like copyright with an R, but no, it's with a W, right? It's writing. And so then I discovered, oh man, I can just erase a headline on my website and write a new one, and sales increase. And it was amazing to me. Why was I fiddling around with these WordPress plugins when I can just rewrite the words? And that became the biggest leverage point for me. And I'm always looking for leverage. I want to get maximum output for minimal input. I know you look at things the same way. And so that's when I said, let me stop all this other stuff that I'm doing, all these other marketing activities. They're all downstream from finding the right words.
I want to dive more into something you said casually, but that is so critical. It was such a kind of life-changing realization for me, which is that marketing is not deception. Why is that such an important point to emphasize?
Yeah, if you have to sell something, so if you're self-employed, a freelancer, an entrepreneur, a creator, then you're in this position where you need to sell to put food on your table. But if you go into it thinking that marketing is deception, or that you're fooling people, or that it's evil, then that doesn't give you very many choices, does it? It's like, okay, either I don't put food on my table, or I do, but I sell my soul. I refuse to make that decision. So, of course, there are people who use marketing for evil, but you have a choice and you don't have to. And there are plenty of examples out there of people who do marketing for good because they truly have something that can help someone. And so all you have to do is look at those examples, those models, and say, I choose to follow that example, not that deceptive one.
So instead of marketing being about deception and manipulation, what is it about?
It's really about educating people. So you are coaching them, educating them, informing them. You treat people like they're smart. And David Ogilvy, a famous advertiser, he has an ad agency named after him. He talked about this, and he said, treat your reader, treat your prospective customer or client as if they are intelligent, because they are. And so I like this idea of the golden rule of marketing. Market to other people how you want to be marketed to. And when I'm being marketed to, I can tell when they're treating me like I'm dumb. It's like, really? Like, I don't buy what you're saying right now. I just don't believe you. Treat me like I'm smart. And so that's how we should market to other people as well. And when you take that approach, it leads you down this path of educating and informing and being brutally honest, even if that means telling the person, you know what, I'm not right for you right now, but this other person is. Let me make an introduction. And if you're doing marketing correctly, there should always be cases where you're telling that prospective customer or client, I'm not the best fit for you. This person is.
I just love this because instead of marketing being, as a teacher and a content creator, I love the teaching part. I love delivering value through knowledge. Instead of marketing being like, okay, let me turn off that part of myself and go into this other identity that is completely the opposite of everything that I
hat
am.
on.
Yeah, it's like the inversion, the opposite of everything I want to do and enjoy doing. Marketing as teaching, as an extension, as a really continuation of the teaching that you're already doing anyway, is so much more accessible to this kind of person.
And it's really survivorship bias where the examples that we know, and we talk about this in the book, the examples we know about marketing are these loud, glaring ones. It's the snake oil salesman, it's the used car salesman. I always say marketing is like a toupee. You only notice the bad examples, right? So it's no surprise that we think that that's what marketing is. But if you set aside those examples and you look at even the best marketers and copywriters throughout history, they were not about making these big outlandish claims. No, they were about making solid arguments backed up by proof. And yes, really educating your customer so that they can make an informed decision and not just make that buying decision, but then on the delivery side, on the product side of things, and you can attest to this, that they're going to be good customers, right? Because of the way that they were brought in. The way they were brought into your product or your service really matters. And you want to think about that on the marketing side as well. Because it's very easy to just shove people through the door, right? And twist arms and force them through. And often we only see that side of it and we say, oh, well, the sale was made. What you don't see is 1 month, 6 months, a year down the line. And often if you bring them in with that heavy-handed approach, a lot of those people refund or just have a lot of customer support tickets or just headaches for you. It's not pretty, but you often don't hear about that side of it. So that's why it's so important to focus on how you get that sale.
So this book was written for the typical smart person, which is a wonderful kind of person to be, but also comes with its own very specific blind spots and pitfalls. What would you say are the main pitfalls of the typical smart person?
Your gift of knowing so much about your topic and being so good at what you do, there's that double-edged sword there where it becomes very difficult to meet people who aren't down in the weeds with you, to meet them up here where they are. If you try to meet them down here, you're going to lose them. These are my weeds. Right? So you learn a lot. You notice all these distinctions about your topic, all the advanced maneuvers, advanced techniques. And you're trying to meet the customer. Let's draw your customer. At this point, they're not your customer. They're your prospect down here. And you're just going to lose them if you do that. So what you need to do, which is very difficult for the smart person, is to come up and meet this person here instead.
Kind of rise above the weeds and the details.
Yes, exactly, which is going to hurt for a lot of people because this process coming up here is going to feel like dumbing it down, but it's actually a word that you use all the time, which is distilling or simplifying, right? So you don't give them all the details yet because it's not good for them. It really doesn't help them. They're gonna turn around and go to someone else. So what you do is you distill it down, you simplify it, meet them where they are, and then you only take them as far down as they need to go to get the result. So coming up to this point, that's what marketing is, meeting your customer where they are, and they're up here, not here.
And what does this mean concretely? Like what are you speaking to? What are the topics you're discussing at this higher elevation?
So the key question that we pose in the book is this question: what does my customer need to believe in order to buy? Kind of a provocative question, but it's a really powerful one. And when you take this approach, when you look at marketing through that filter, that question automatically jumps you out of the weeds. And so that's why it's so useful, because it's hard to get out of the weeds otherwise. So what you're doing when you ask that question is you say, okay, well, what are the things that I've been taking for granted, or the assumptions that I've been making? And then you go back and you challenge those assumptions, and you actually give voice to them, and you use them to help educate your prospective customer. And that turns into your marketing content that meets them where they are and then can take them deeper.
Let's dive into a little bit of belief building. This is really one of the central ideas in the book. For someone who's wondering, why beliefs? Why do I have to build them? Like, how do beliefs enter into marketing?
Great question. And yeah, that is the main technique that we teach in the book. So let me draw it for you. And what we really need to do is ask the question first: what is marketing and what is sales? Okay, so I'm going to draw the spectrum. And this is, you can think about this as the buyer's journey. And so it's really split up into two phases, but they're not equal. So this phase is about 25% of the process. And this is sales.
So what happens? What are the earlier stages of that journey?
Well, this is marketing. So there's a lot of definitions of marketing, but this for me made it the most clear, is to think about it this way, through this visual. And so this is what marketing is, and it lets us ask the question, okay, well, what's the job of this stage? And to answer that question, I love the quote from the famous management consultant, Peter Drucker. And he says that the goal of marketing is to make selling unnecessary. And so this is relief for the smart person who doesn't like the selling phase, because selling we think of as like twisting arms, making the pitch, making the offer, offering discounts, whatever it is, all those merchandising tactics that we think of, slashing out the price and writing a discounted one, right? And if you do this right, as Drucker said, this becomes unnecessary, or at least a heck of a lot easier. So the mistake a lot of people make is they take someone who's completely cold and they jump right into selling. And of course, if you're pitching someone and hard selling and they're way over here, that's going to turn them off, right? So it's no surprise that salespeople have this negative impression. So what you want to do is do marketing, and that's where belief building comes into play. So you want to ask that question, which we pose in the book: what does my customer need to believe in order to buy? So over here, where they are completely unaware, they know that there's something wrong. They can feel that unease, that tension in their body, but they can't articulate their problem. And so you've probably been in a situation where then someone comes along and articulates your problem even better than you can. And you're like, oh man, that is it, right? So that gets you to about right here, right? Now they're looking for solutions to the problem. And again, we're educating them. We can't take anything for granted. We need to educate them on these different solutions. So that gets them about right here. And then we need to take them a little bit further and talk about your potential solution, the way that you go about solving the problem. And that gets them about here. And then only then are they really ready for the sales process, because someone who's gone through this process and is right here versus trying to skip to right here, this person is so much more educated on what you do and their problem and the potential solutions. They can now fully value your offer, and they're much more likely to take you up on it. And it's also a much more ethical way of doing it, and a lot more enjoyable for the business owner.
This is also kind of especially relevant to the internet, right? Because in the past, if someone's at a store or on the street or whatever, if you have one interaction, one shot with them to turn them into a customer, you have no choice but to try to skip to the end. But with the internet, we have these different touch points. They're subscribed to your newsletter, they're subscribed to your YouTube channel, they're seeing your posts on social media, whatever it is. So you basically have the opportunity to take them on this journey, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I use a golf analogy for this one. So a lot of people try to hit a hole in one, just whack it off the tee and hit the hole in one, like that maybe vendor on the street who they got to capture that person who's walking by, so they try anything, right? But on the internet, we have this huge advantage in that we can continue to follow up with people. And so we don't have to hit that hole in one. We can just hit it down the fairway, get it pretty far down, and then keep hitting that ball and getting it closer and closer and closer. And if you think about all your customers, your whole audience has all these different golf balls, eventually you're going to be at this point where you're right here and you have all these golf balls around the hole, and all you got to do is just tap them in.
Let's make this super tangible, because I remember when you were first introducing this idea to me, I thought, well, people already know everything they need to know about note-taking and knowledge management, but we actually found through talking to people, through surveying them, that there are some beliefs very early on in the journey. For example, the one I'll always remember is, my knowledge is valuable and worth capturing and revisiting. I had never considered that there are a lot of people, in fact, the vast majority of people, that don't even believe that. It's never occurred to them that they have knowledge and expertise and insights and things like that. And so as long as I didn't address that belief, which is quite a core fundamental belief, the market of people that I could reach was drastically limited.
Yeah. Assumptions will destroy your marketing efforts. So question every assumption. And if you're a smart person, you're probably making a lot of them. So you were doing a lot of tutorials on note taking and really being in the weeds of that, which assumed that people, one, knew that their knowledge was valuable, and two, had gone all the way down the spectrum towards doing something about it. So you're operating right here, but everyone else is way upstream here. So what we did was we questioned that assumption and didn't just question it internally, but turned it into words on the page, into emails and marketing material. And once we did that, then we met people where they were, which was right here. And only then could we take them further downstream here to where we were doing these more detailed tutorials.
Yeah, it's like at the time, at the beginning, I thought I was teaching a course on how to use Evernote. It was a technology, it was a software tutorial course. But over time, I've kind of gone upstream and realized it's really about personal development. It's believing in themselves, trusting that they have something to say that's worth saying, trusting that technology can be their friend, not their enemy. These things which really don't have much to do at all until later with the technical details of how to use a particular piece of software.
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of, especially online course creators that I work with, get caught in what I would call help desk mode. Because you're teaching Evernote and you're putting out YouTube videos and doing tutorials on it. And so that's what people think that you specialize in. And so they ask you questions about that. And you feel like you're the help desk for Evernote. Now, what you did was you took a step back and said, no, Evernote only really is part of this larger thing, which is really more personal development and achieving my goals and creating great works. And when you do that, you serve your customers so much better. And you can charge higher prices because what you're doing is more valuable. It's higher leverage for them than just learning how to click a drop-down menu on Evernote. There's so many benefits to taking this approach where you pull yourself out of the weeds and you meet your customer where they are.
At the same time, it's so hard, right? I remember how hard it was because it was like all ironically, the doubts and the fears that we address with personal development came up. Things like, who am I to speak to? Things like their psychology, their beliefs, their past, their background, their relationship with themselves. So I had to almost expand myself and believe in myself more to speak to those issues. Is that what are some common things that people have to do or learn as they go kind of upstream here?
You have to really value yourself and what you know. And that's a big pitfall I see with smart people. And look, this happened to me too. I had this beer brewing website and I was really in the weeds of beer brewing. I mean, really advanced techniques, how to harvest your yeast, how to brew all these advanced styles of beer. And when I took a step back and started being more of a storyteller and talking about why we brew beer in the first place and how much we love it and how much it can change our lives, it was a little bit weird for me at first, but I gave it a shot. I experimented because I heard from someone else that this is the better approach to take, kind of like we're telling everyone right now. And that's what I would recommend is you just experiment with this and you will notice a difference in your audience. It's a palpable reaction. And it's funny because I remember one of the first big responses that you got, and it was from the person who wrote the foreword to our book, who is Ali Abdaal.
Yes.
And because he posted this, I think it was on his blog, and he said, oh man, I just came across this guy, Tiago Forte. And when he was writing, Tiago, it's like he was speaking directly to me. And I remember that you highlighted that and said, that's why I'm taking this approach, because of people like Ali.
Yeah, because he doesn't use Evernote and never will. So as long as I was stuck in help desk mode, I could not access the vast majority of people who are simply using other software. That's been another effect of this, is as you go upstream, there's just more people over here, right? And so, for example, once I started realizing, oh, I'm actually teaching a set of principles that apply to any software, suddenly the people who could be part of this journey at all went from the Evernote user base, which is tiny, to anyone who uses practically any software. That vastly expanded my market, increased my sales, and also, by the way, led to other things like my book. You can't write, it doesn't really make sense to write a book on one software program. You write it once you have the confidence that you have a set of principles that expand beyond that narrow thing. For someone who is not convinced, or they think, I can't change someone's beliefs, or people's beliefs, those are just what they are and they can never change, or anything like that. How do we actually figure out what beliefs our potential customers currently have, and then how do we change them?
Yeah, it's a good question, because you do need to identify those current beliefs before you can instill these new beliefs. This is this whole idea of meeting people where they are, in terms of their current beliefs. So let me give you 3 questions that you can ask to help you with this. Okay, so the first one is, what are the bad questions that they're asking? You might call these dumb questions. Don't say it to them. You might think that though in your head. Any expert has experienced this, where someone asks you a question who's a novice in your topic, and you really don't even want to answer that question. You're like, I got this as an example with my beer brewing website all the time. And I would have people ask me these really advanced questions about beer brewing, like, what yeast strain should I use? Should I use a strain from northern Belgium or southern Belgium? Which is a good question for a really advanced brewer who's maybe trying to win some big competition. But for someone just starting out, that is way too in the weeds. And it would be wrong for me to answer that question, because it's a disservice to that person, because it validates that question and it says, that's a good question to ask. So this goes back to this whole idea of we're operating at this higher level, trying to send someone down the right path for them before pulling them down in the weeds. So really listening for those bad questions is a great indicator of the current beliefs that they have.
Funny enough, a bad question in my field is, which note-taking app should I use? At least for a first question. People think that's the first step, but well, how can I even engage in this without a note-taking app? But asking that question doesn't make any sense. It has no meaning until you know what you're trying to accomplish. So I tried to get them instead, maybe we'll get to this later, to ask, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Which projects, which goals? Because the answer to that question, which note-taking app should you use, might be radically different depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
So let me give you a second question you can ask here, which is, what are the myths that my audience believes? A good example of this, I was doing work with a client who's a photography expert, sells online courses in photography, has a big audience. And a huge myth in the photography world is that the most important thing is the quality of the camera. That if I just get a better camera and spend more money on that fancy camera, it's going to automatically improve my photos. And what you actually find is that it often makes them worse, because you don't know how to operate the thing and you don't have the skill set. So asking yourself, what are the myths or maybe the misconceptions that my audience has? That's a great way to identify their current beliefs. And then you can meet them where they are and take them further.
You know, my dad's a professional, lifelong artist. He buys his supplies like at the cheapest hardware store. He gets the cheapest canvas. He gets paint that's like not even like professional paint. It's like house paint or something. He looks for the most bare bones utilitarian, you know, the cheapest brushes, because he knows those things don't matter. And often he'll comment that he'll go to someone's house who's a very occasional hobbyist painter, and they have the most fancy, expensive, premium materials. It's all untouched. It's just sitting there almost just as the scenery.
So the third one is behaviors. It'd be nice if we could just ask someone, well, what are your current beliefs around X topic? But it's usually not that easy. People aren't aware of these things. So what you want to do is look at their behaviors, look at the things that they are doing, look at how they are spending their money, look at what they are spending their time on. Does anything come to mind from your topic?
Yeah, it really does. It's people who are spending tons and tons of time, meticulously organizing, setting up fancy labeling systems and tagging systems and databases with many rows and all these properties and basically a lot of fussy in the weeds, kind of meticulous effort. And it really takes a lot of effort instead of spending that effort on actually moving forward the things that are important to them.
Yeah. So you looked at these behaviors, you saw that they were always organizing their Evernote or their second brain tool. And what that shows is really their value system,
Yeah.
right? That's another way to think about this belief building effort is what do people think is important? What do they value the most? They say, this is super valuable. And how can you look at that and say, no, actually, that's down here. And this other thing that you weren't even looking at is up here. It's way more valuable. It's way more important.
Yeah, it's their value system and it's also just their theories about what is going to work. The reason they're putting in all that effort, sometimes it's because they actually inherently enjoy it. That is true. But many times they think, oh, if I just organize, all my notes according to this 7 criteria tagging system, then the thing I really want to do, which is always some sort of creative project, some sort of creative endeavor, will be easier. And often I just have to shine a light on that and say, it won't. The root issue here is that you're afraid. You need to face the fear and you need to face it usually through taking action. So this is a great framework to identify their current beliefs. But I think there's kind of an elephant in the room here that I want to address, which is how do you change them? How do you actually instill a belief that someone doesn't currently have?
You can't just leave these as answers on a worksheet, something that's just internal for you. What you need to do is give voice to these false beliefs that they have. And so you do that through your marketing content, and that becomes the goal of your marketing content. And this is something that I really preach because it's so important and it's not very well known today, is that what you're doing in marketing is making an argument. A lot of people with their marketing content, they're just talking about their topic, just kind of generally talking about their topic or teaching these implementation details, these tutorials. But we talked about this value system, right? And identifying what's important. Well, you can't just take for granted that people are going to believe you or that people know that. You need to argue for that. It is a stand that you are taking. These are assertions that you're making. And we talk about this in more depth in the book. And so this becomes the goal of your marketing content is making an argument for your recommended way of doing things. And that is that second phase of the belief building process. So the first phase is identifying these current beliefs, and we gave you some ways to do that. The second phase then is making an argument for your way of doing things. And that way they can properly value your product and decide whether or not to invest with you.
So let's kind of unpack that a bit. So you are making an argument in favor of a new belief or a certain point of view. How do you I really want to zoom in on what makes that person accept that? How do you present that argument in a way that they go, "Oh, I see that point of view. I am now going to accept that belief."
Yeah, so a great way to think about this is to think about a lawyer in a courtroom. So the lawyer is making an argument to the judge or to the jury. So you can ask, well, how does a lawyer do that? Well, one, you have to make these claims or assertions in the first place. So to take one of yours, you're making this assertion that, well, it's not really the tool that's important. It's actually what you want to achieve with the tool that matters. And unfortunately, you can't just say that, right? Because that would just be the claim. You need to back that up with proof. And so what the lawyer does in the courtroom, and we've all seen this, whether we've been in court or we've seen the courtroom dramas, Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C, right? That is proof or evidence. And there's a variety of forms that can take, but that is the basic 1-2 punch, is making these claims or assertions and backing them up with proof. And if you do that and you do it well, then you will sway the judge or the jury. They will say, okay, I've seen enough. I believe you.
And that proof, like you say, can take different forms, right? Like what are a few of those forms that proof can take?
Yeah, so my favorite framework for this goes back, funny enough, thousands of years to the ancient Greeks and Aristotle and the field of rhetoric. Today in marketing, we've largely forgotten what marketing is. It really is rhetoric. And so the proof points that we can use, my favorite ones come from Aristotle, and he has 3 primary ones: ethos, pathos, logos. So ethos, this has to do with the character of the person making the argument. So an authoritative figure, someone who has experience like you do in your field, is going to be more credible than someone who doesn't have that kind of experience or authority. So ethos is the character of that person. It can be the person who's selling the product, or you might bring in someone else, maybe an outside expert who has credibility. Next, we have pathos. And so you can think about pathos as emotion. So you think about that lawyer in the courtroom, and it's not always a dry and boring argument. It's often not. The best lawyers often tell stories. I mean, we are humans at the end of the day, and we respond to stories. So telling emotional stories, whether it's your story or someone else's story, is another great way to get your point across, to make your argument, to back up your claim.
And you can deliver these different kinds of proof via many channels, right? This can be a blog post on your blog, some text in an email that you send out, can be something on social media, a YouTube video. You are free to choose the specific format that you're going to use to deliver those, right?
Exactly. That's the great thing about this approach, is that it's platform agnostic. So you can use it in your emails, you can use it on Facebook, and it's medium agnostic. You can do this through written text, through audio or video.
I think that point that it's platform agnostic is so crucial. I mean, as we're speaking right now, the US Congress is basically going to ban TikTok. And I just think of all those creators, just as an example, who invested in some cases years of their lives in that platform. It's just going to disappear. Or maybe it won't disappear, but it'll be worse than it was before. You really, if you're in it for the long term, and I think we want people to be, you really can't be wedded to any specific tactic or platform, right?
Exactly. And now you can see the mistake in thinking of marketing and immediately thinking of TikTok or Facebook or a platform. I mean, the stuff we're talking about is way upstream of that. And that's why we say get that core message correct, which has to do with making an argument and backing it up with proof. And then you can send that core message down any of these distribution channels, including TikTok, or if you don't have access to that anymore, no big deal. We'll send it down email or Facebook or any of these other ones.
This is actually something I want to double down on a little bit. How does this overall philosophy, this overall approach, simplify the burden, the effort that goes into marketing for creators and experts?
That burden is largely caused by those downstream tactics and marketing channels. If you don't do any of this upfront work and you dive right into Facebook or Instagram, you're going to be overwhelmed by things. We've all seen these articles, 50 Instagram hacks, 20 ways to go viral on Facebook. Those things only really matter if you get this upstream core message correct. And I'm showing it like this as a single circle, simple. It's one thing. It's not easy, but it's simple, meaning it's not complex.
And it's so true. I mean, I've built a sizable business, and we still haven't done most of those downstream tactics. We're not on Instagram. We've never run a paid ad. We've never done a webinar. It's like we've actually built a sizable business with a sizable team, still focused really just mostly on email. Email is kind of the ultimate for just delivering, compelling, convincing words to people's brains. And I just love that I get to ongoingly ignore, I feel like 70 or 80% of the whole noise that is marketing, and still have a great business, a great amount of revenue, a great team. I don't have to occupy my brain, which doesn't like occupying itself with that information, with all the fine-grained tactics and tricks of marketing.
Yeah, it's fun when you can say no and still win.
Yes. And who would you say this book is not for?
Not for what I would call the bro marketers, the ones who are just churn and burn and have their Lamborghini in the background and don't care at all about the quality of customer they're getting. They're just trying to maximize, like, okay, how much money can I make and get refunds even as high as possible without getting into major trouble. So if you have that churn and burn mentality, or you're just a short-term thinker, or you're just really into all these gimmicks and the hype and all that stuff, then this really isn't right for you. This is a much classier approach, even a more academic approach. That might sound boring, but I don't think having a thriving business, doing what you love and having great clients is boring at all.
This conversation has, even though I also co-authored the book, has further clarified for me kind of what our main message is with this book. A lot of people, especially smart people, think that marketing is inherently deception, and it is very much not the case. They think it's channels. They think it's TikTok. Oh no, now it's Snapchat. oh, now it's Instagram Reels or whatever it is. It's really not about that. And lastly, they think it's tactics, a little trick, a little technique that is somehow going to juice up sales. And it really is not about tactics. Instead, marketing at its core, at its heart, at least if you do it this way, is really about education.
Exactly. You're educating them so they can properly value your offer.
Billy, thank you for being here. I'm so excited for this. It's been a long time in the making. We've been working on this many months, especially you. And I've never put out a marketing course or product or book of any kind. There's no other methodology or philosophy that I've been able to stand behind. But I'm proud to put my name on this book, and you can see the cover here, because anytime someone asks me about marketing, which they often do, I'm just going to direct them straight here to this book. It really is the best approach to what I think is such a core skill for so many creators.
Thank you. Yeah, it is something that's so necessary, and we might even see it as a necessary evil. But I hope after this, like me and like you have this realization that it doesn't have to be that way, and it can actually be a really good and valuable thing. So thanks so much. We've had a heck of a story together to this point. I can't wait for this next chapter, sorry the pun, in our story together. But it's going to be a really fun one. And thank you for everyone who reads the book and watches this video.
If anything we've said today resonates with you, go ahead and pick up a copy of Simple Marketing for Smart People on Amazon.com. It's available as an ebook and a paperback, and I really hope you get the value and really the transformation for yourself that I got from me and my business. They're not about tricking or manipulating. If anything we've said today resonates with you, go ahead and pick up a copy.